Time to play the game. Time to play the game.
Are you ready to rumble? Today we're going to talk about the WWE and the way it has not really confined itself to the ring or to the world of Vince McMahon. Instead, we are living in Vince McMahon's world. Increasingly, some of the concepts and conceits, I guess you would say, of WWE have spilled over into American public life. We're going to try to explain this because once you get it, a lot of things that are happening in America right now look very, very different. So this will be worth your while, even if you think you hate wrestling.
Ready to run like a Cleveland bench from a smoking gun. I am the game and I make the rules. So move on out, you can die like a fool. Trying to figure out what my move's gonna be. Come on over, sucker, why don't you act?
Hi, this is Colin. Before we begin, I mean, technically we have begun, but before we begin, we recorded this show in March of 2025, so you might hear references to specific events that'll make you go, what? Well, that was just something that was happening in March of 2025. The big ideas, I promise you, still hold.
Sometimes I wish that I was an angel, a fallen angel who visits your dreams, and in those dreams I'd blow you a message that says you really want me. Sometimes I wish that I was a wrestler, a Mexican wrestler in a red vinyl mask, and I might grab you and body slam you and maybe cause physical harm.
So, by the way, that's our old friend Jill Sobel. Couldn't do the show without doing Jill's Mexican wrestler song. So, I had these kinds of aperçus recently that, or at least within the last 6 months, let's say, that involve the topic today, which is not just the WWE, but the way in which it has been bleeding into the public sphere, into our discourse about public life in America in lots of different ways. And one of the eye-openers or ear-openers or something was listening to, we have a friendly relationship with the Conspirituality podcast, and I heard our guest today, our main guest today, on that podcast and just saying things that I hadn't heard anybody say before. But there was another exchange that also kind of raised my interest as well, involving two fairly well-known but very different kinds of commentators. But to get to that, what we're going to do right now is we're going to remind you. We're doing this on Friday the 7th. We're going to remind you what happened exactly a week ago, right around this time of day, as I recall, too. And that was, of course, the meeting between Trump, Vance, and Zelensky. Here's a little bit of that. A1, Maestro.
The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television, I will say that. All right, we'll see what we can do about putting it together. Thank you.
Okay, and sorry if you're having PTSD. We don't want to hurt anybody here. But so a lot of different people, including me, had things to say about that. But one of the people that I was interested in, because I had heard earlier months ago Jon Stewart on the Ezra Klein podcast, and it turns out that Jon and Ezra are both big WWE fans, know enough about it to hold a conversation about it. So I was kind of interested in what Stewart had to say about all this, and he didn't disappoint me. A4, Maestro.
If that does not immediately explain to you our current geopolitical climate, You must have grown out of watching wrestling through the normal course of aging. I, on the other hand, understand this in my bones. This explains it, folks. All of your shock, all of your disappointment, all of your anger. It's in there. It's in the squared circle.
All right. So now let's get to our guest. We're very excited to have her with us today, Josephine Riesman, the author of Ringmaster, Vince McMahon, and the Unmaking of America. And what began as that project, I think, has also, in the way of WWE, expanded into a set of perceptions about what's going on in public life these days. But Josie, welcome to our show.
It's great to be here. You know, the circumstances are always wild whenever somebody invites me on their show. If I am called for, then clearly reality has taken a sharp turn, and I'm happy to be here.
You must be very busy these days then. So, could you just react to the Zelensky thing? I mean, I think Stewart was kind of comparing it to the heel turn that happened almost simultaneously in the actual WWE. But do your own breakdown of the Zelensky
I mean, if I were to venture a comparison, and I hope I can say this on the air, it was a bit like what they call in wrestling a screw job, which is when a promoter, someone with power in a wrestling organization, will tell a wrestler, okay, the script is tonight, things are going to go such and such a way. And then without telling that wrestler, flips the script on them and has something unexpected happen, which is, of course, antithetical to the idea of this theatrical art form. What I saw in the Zelensky conference was this attempt on the part of Trump, Vance, etc., to sort of lure Zelensky in for what he thinks. In their minds, they're thinking, oh, he's going to think this is just like any other invite to the White House, and we're going to have a nice little civil conversation. And then we're going to flip the script on him, and it'll be great television. We're just going to start being mean to him, and we're going to say that America is completely against him and not for him. But what was interesting to me was that Zelensky is a gifted improv and like stand-up and comedian sort of type of guy. This is where he comes from. And those art forms are not far away from pro wrestling. And I was really kind of impressed at how well he rolled with those, wrestling type punches.
Right. It was almost like, oh, it's going to be like this. Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, he's like, okay, we're going to do this. Fine.
So now we have to explain a little bit more about the relationship between President Donald Trump and WWE. It's kind of a lifetime relationship, right? It starts when he's a kid.
Yeah, well, when Donnie Trump was growing up in Queens, the only wrestling that you could get, really, the local wrestling, was run by the McMahon family. It was run by Jess McMahon and then Vince McMahon Sr. And we have people going back who knew Donald going back to those days in the 50s, 60s, and they will tell you he was a complete wrestling head. He would watch it with them every week. He would go to the live shows. There's a story about how, there was this one wrestler, Antonino Rocca, who Donnie just refused to understand the actual name of and kept calling Rocky Antonino instead of Antonino Rocca. So, yes, Donald Trump has been a fan of McMahon-style wrestling for a very, very long time. And in those past few decades, the past 40-odd years, he's developed a personal relationship with the McMahon family that began at a Rolling Stones concert they attended together in 1981 and now has included hosting WrestleManias, participating in WrestleManias, WrestleMania being the annual extravaganza of the McMahon family for their wrestling. And now Linda, of course, has served in the cabinet in the past administration and is serving once again, doing as the I guess the idea is the last Secretary of Education ever.
Exactly. So, but I mean, more than that, the relationship between Vince McMahon and Donald Trump, the way that you portray it, it's not just that Vince McMahon can get him on the phone and give him some advice, This is a
No.
different kind of advice that he gets, and maybe significantly, he and one other person who also comes from the entertainment side of things have a
Right,
different. So
right.
tell that story.
Yes, sure. So, at least going back to when I was doing my research, the status quo for how Donald Trump did phone calls was he would basically, no matter who it was, it could be the Chancellor of Germany, a pro golfer he once knew, he'd put them on speakerphone and sort of showboat for whoever was in the entourage in the room. But there were only two people in the world that he would kick everybody out of the room for so he could have a private conversation. And one was Mark Burnett of the producer of The Apprentice, and a key part of the reason that Donald Trump has become what he is. And the other was Vince McMahon, who he's known for 40 odd years, and who I think he really looks up to, or at least, as of throughout most of their relationship together, I think he really has looked up to Vince because Trump really admires wrestling and admires wrestlers and people who can make wrestling work. It's really kind of remarkable. I mean, you see him doing the Undertaker's podcast and just sounding like a child because he wants to turn around the interview and just ask questions about the basics of how wrestling works rather than the Undertaker interviewing him about politics. I could ramble all day, but Donald Trump is very steeped in this idea of spectacle above all, of warping reality to your satisfaction, and of this very curious little dance where you take something true and warp it into something that is not exactly untrue, but very, very false at the same time.
And that brings us perfectly to the threshold of kayfabe and neo-kayfabe. So kayfabe, for people who don't know these terms, kayfabe is an old term and probably comes from the world of carnies. And in the early days of professional wrestling, there was just basically one fiction, a single fiction. The fiction being that this was an actual competitive wrestling match whose outcome was not foreordained. That was the single fiction of kayfabe. As you write, Josie, that died out for a while and had to be replaced, or was replaced, rather ingeniously by the McMahons and their lieutenants and stuff. With something you call neo-kayfabe. Explain what neo-kayfabe is.
Sure. So old kayfabe, which lasted for about a century, from the end of the 19th century until 1989, you can really pin a date on it when the New York Times ran a front page story about how wrestling was fixed. For that century, you had this lie, which was, I would expand what you said and say that the lie was, ladies and gentlemen, and whoever else is here, what you are going to see here tonight is real. The personalities of the wrestlers are real. The stakes are real. And the matches are not predetermined. You are seeing something real. Now enjoy the show. What was interesting was that was kind of a big flat lie that you could all stand on. And even if you knew it was a lie, it was a fun lie. It was a lie that seemed relatively harmless, and adherence to it could be a way of showing that you were part of some kind of in-group. And that kayfabe, that term, was actually not really well known outside of wrestling until much later, but within wrestling, you'd use it all the time. You'd say, hey, an outsider's coming over, kayfabe, and that means you have to get back into character. You'd have to, in the old system, pretend that you hated your rival. You couldn't be seen having a beer together. But once old kayfabe dies in 1989, there's a few years where wrestling kind of languishes because there's no plausible deniability anymore. You can't suspend your disbelief in the same way. And although Vince McMahon is not really the person who invents it, he ends up being the person who really codifies this thing that I ended up calling neo-kayfabe, where it's not one big flat lie. You're telling the audience the exact opposite thing of what you were used to doing. You used to do, which is, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone else out there, what you are seeing tonight is fake. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. All these things are fake. It's all okay, except, and then you sort of whisper to the audience, sotto voce, there might be some reality buried beneath the surface here, if you know where to look. And maybe that reality tonight might burst out and we might lose control and things you don't expect and we don't expect might happen. There's always this promise of a choose your own reality now, where you can kind of go, well, yeah, I know most of this wrestling is fake, but I think that one match, I think those two guys really did hate each other.
Right.
And I read a rumor about it.
I'm going
to
to read your own words back to you because I think you do such a beautiful job right here.
Thank you.
A slippery, ever wobbling jumble of truths, half-truths, and outright falsehoods, all delivered with the utmost passion and commitment. After a while, the producers and the consumers of neo-kayfabe tend to lose the ability to distinguish between what's real and what isn't. So, I mean, at times, nobody's exactly sure. Including the people who should be in charge of this. So let me just give you an example from the Trump administration and have you riff on it a little bit. Because I think the way that you describe this is the way we've seen Trump float the idea of annexing Canada, which initially seems like a very kayfabe-y kind of stunt. And it's treated that way by the Canadians. And in fact, there's even one Canadian minister who says, in the spirit of McMahon, says, well, maybe we'll annex Oregon and Washington and Northern California or whatever.
Sure, you respond in kind.
But now, we read in the papers in the last few days, Justin Trudeau now thinks this wasn't a fake idea or a stagey idea. It's actually very possibly a real proposal contemplated by Trump. To me, that's what you just described about WWE.
It's there's this term from the neo-kayfabe era, which is, or this phrase rather, which is working yourself into a shoot. There used to be a bifurcation in wrestling where if something was fake, it was a work. If something was real, it was a shoot. And there's this way in neo-kayfabe where, because you're playing around in that gray zone between, do I mean what I'm saying? Do I not mean what I'm saying? You can you can start out telling a lie and end up very much committed to that lie and then start believing that lie. And then maybe it's a plan of action that you start out as a bargaining position, but you keep saying it so often that you work yourself into a shoot, and all of a sudden it's an actual plan of action that you are, setting forward. And an invasion of Canada, I guess, is something that's maybe on the table now, for all I know. But part of the reason neo-kayfabe works is you're never sure. The brain is constantly trying to sort out, was that legit? Was that not legit? The human brain doesn't like to be confused about what's real and what isn't, and that's how your attention gets held. And Trump, like Vince McMahon, knows that ultimately the real commodity here is attention.
Right. So you're saying in 2016, I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to make Mexico pay for it. Kayfabe. Right. A lot of this stuff is kayfabe, saying you're going to take Greenland or whatever. I mean, it might be real, but it also has that quality of not being very clear about whether it's real. And I've even noticed, Josie, that in his cabinet appointments or in his attempted cabinet appointments, there's a big kayfabe quality. We could start, I think, with Matt Gaetz. This is okay. So that within the world of wrestling, there are heels; those are the bad guys, and baby faces; those are the good guys. Gaetz, I mean, you're nominating a heel right now. You're nominating a guy who clearly is kind of a villain. Interestingly, I don't know if you know this or not. He grew up in the house that was used in The Truman Show, a movie about the blurring between fiction and reality. I'm not kidding.
I didn't know
His family owns that house, as his nomination was coming to sort of a head, so to speak, Tom Tillis from North Carolina said that the Gaetz hearings would make for great popcorn eating. So this is all kind of, it's like he's taken all of that blurry stuff that you've written so eloquently about, and we should say also, The Apprentice was kayfabe. It's not all spontaneous stuff. Yeah.
Well,
anyway,
reality TV did what pro wrestling had already been doing for a little while, and in many ways does it better. But like the Matt Gaetz thing, that's an interesting. It's interesting because yes, it's also part of the pro wrestling evolution that you've seen under the McMahon regime, where heels and faces, you said the heel's the bad guy and the face is the good guy. I don't think that's even the definition really anymore. The heel is the one you're supposed to boo, and the face is the one you're supposed to cheer. And that face, that baby face, could be a real freaking jerk. But if you're supposed to cheer him, if you think he's cool, if you think that the do-gooder is more irritating, then you're going to boo the do-gooder. You know, the morality, it's that, and that's why you're able to get these weird, you get these interests, like Pete Hegseth. You know, Pete Hegseth makes it all the way, and it's like, this is somebody who's so antagonistic, who has so many qualities that are just so openly confrontational, but he's still, for the Republicans, effectively the face. He has to be jerk that he is, their jerk, you know, and there's many such cases.
So let me just do one more, and then we need to take a break here. But
Please.
I think the other one, oddly enough, I think is RFK Jr., who the first time he joined Trump on stage, Trump deliberately did a WWE style introduction. Here's TMZ describing it. Trump bellowed Bobby's name. The crowd went nuts. The DJ queued up Foo Fighters' My Hero. Out came RFK Jr. with a bunch of pyrotechnics lighting up the stage. But think about who this guy is. First of all, think of some of his associations. Jesse Ventura was floated as a possible running mate. I mean, and not, you know, in a fantastical way. He's also very close to Aaron Rodgers, who's kind of a WWE freak who mimes a WWE championship belt and actually wore one, I think, when he won the Super Bowl. And he's totally into Michael Cole, this legendary announcer. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is. And RFK Jr. is married to Cheryl Hines, who's in another reality-bending series. Curb Your Enthusiasm is very kayfabe, right? What's really Larry David? Anyway, take that and run with it a little bit, and then we'll have to.
Oh dear, I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, RFK Jr. I don't know. I find it hard to laugh about the guy. He's so terrifying to me, and there is this way in which he overlapped and neo kayfabe overlaps with the wellness and kind of woo-woo fascism that can end up worming its way into mainstream politics, where there's this almost this spectacle of like, can he really get away with defying the medical consensus like that? Can he really get away with saying these things that you were only previously allowed to say on weird chat rooms a decade ago? There's this daring nature of RFK that I think people find really thrilling, and maybe that's part of why you get all these weird stories about him being so attractive, being such a magnet for people for romantic attention. You know, is that there is that thrill you get when you're like, is he really going to get away with this? You know, is he really that? Does he really have a brain worm? You know?
Right. No, he's like, you know, he's like Stefan on Saturday Night Live. You know, this club's got everything: psychedelics, dead bears, brain worms, sex addiction, raw milk, stem
bad
cells,
divorces,
everything. All right, we have to take a break. This is so much fun. I mean, just fun in kind of a slightly scary and alarming way, but we're having a lot of fun here. Stay with us.
The bad guy's hip. No one anticipates the sunset flip. The referee and your opponent will hold you there. And we're gonna bring in a folding chair.
Blue cyclone. Well, the wife went out of town about a year or so back and left me home by myself to batch, and after 5 straight nights of TV, I was ready to scream. So I called up this beer drinking buddy of mine. I said, Bill, I ain't having a real good time. He said, well, why don't we go to wrestling matches and let off a little steam? Well, now, I'd never seen the matches before, and when we reached that arena door, the crowd was already backed up plumb out in the street. Yeah, people were pushing and shoving like cattle. Just getting in line was a heck of a battle.
I'd play the whole thing, but we're on a tight schedule here because we have a lot of ground to cover with our terrific guest here. Very excited to have with us Josephine Riesman, author of Ringmaster, Vince McMahon, and the Unmaking of America. Well, I am sitting here in Connecticut, Josie, and there's obviously, this is a Connecticut story to a certain degree in terms of where the headquarters are.
Very much so.
And also in terms of, as somebody that you mentioned a little bit earlier, our current and possibly last Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. So we should say, one thing that we didn't say about neo-kayfabe is that the McMahons made themselves characters in this whole drama that they were unfolding.
Yes,
At one point, I think starting around 2001 maybe, Linda was fake in a wheelchair because he'd been drugging her so that he could have affairs with other hot female wrestlers. And there's this whole moment where she's in the ring looking all groggy in her wheelchair, and she's messing around with, I forget who the wrestler was, but
Trish Stratus.
Yes, Trish Stratus right in front of him. And she gets out of the wheelchair and she kicks him in his overactive groin. So that's her current secretary. But that's one of the things that they did, right? They made this story up. It was about the family often rebelling against Vince. I think at one point, Linda and the daughter Stephanie were supposedly transferring their shares to Steve Austin.
I mean, it was it was all made up business deals about who controls the company. But it started with Vince inserting himself as, he'd been the announcer for decades and never acknowledged that he was the owner after he was the owner. But then once he inserted himself into the action, he became the ultimate heel. He was the hub for all evil in the storylines, the character of Mr. McMahon. And then Stephanie joined the action. Shane joined the action, Stephanie joined the action, and then ultimately Linda did. The entire quartet are part of this fictional or, kayfabe, neo-kayfabe universe, and that put them on the map. That's part of the reason why we're here, because a lot of people watch wrestling, and, it was funny, when Linda was first running for Senate in 2010, people kept trying to hit her with, isn't this nutso that this woman who puts up all this filth on television is running for family values? And although she didn't win, that attack, I don't think ever really had much grip to it because a lot of people had watched and enjoyed that filth. It's like, well, great, I enjoyed that product. Maybe I'd enjoy the way she is as an elected official. She lost both those elections, but still.
Right. By the way, I should say I covered both the 2010 campaign against Blumenthal and then the 2012 campaign, which got Chris Murphy.
You probably know better than I do. Then I will defer to you.
I'll say this, But by the way, Chris Murphy, who was, of course, interrogating her during the confirmation hearings, he got his Senate seat by defeating Linda McMahon in 2012.
That's correct.
So, I would say that during the campaign, there are a lot of allegations, serious allegations. It's not just that this is kind of, tacky stuff. It's that, there are allegations of sexual harassment and intimidation and assault and concussions and steroids, all of which, by the way, the WWE and the McMahons deny. But and those allegations, I think, also get sucked into the kayfabe vortex where things that are real and things that are unreal start to mishmash.
Absolutely. And you can be Vince McMahon or Linda McMahon for that matter and get away with a lot by going, oh, well, that was just what my character did, or you're getting me confused with my character. It's this dodge where you can kind of get away with real life actions by confusing people into thinking, well, I can never trust this person. And that's a hack in the human brain. We'll just go, oh, well, that's the McMahons. You never know with them, as opposed to being frustrated that we don't ever know with them and that they often get away with things because of that confusion.
And I think actually for the opposition party, there's some real questions. Like, how do you respond to all of this stuff? And so, on Tuesday night, we saw Congressman Al Green, do something that also looked kind of WWE's. Standing there, he's waving his cane in the air. He's yelling, "You don't have a mandate. You don't have a mandate." The congressman whose district includes the whole WWE nexus, Jim Himes, actually voted for censure of Green.
Oh,
but I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
it's an interesting question. Do you try to do your own neo kayfabe, or do they just have such a lock on it that you have to do something else?
Personally, I would say you have to fight at least with theatricality. And that's something the Dems are really bad at. Like, there's just not a real sense of, oh, they do stuff that's, as the kids might say, based, that feels, even if it's evil, at least it's thrilling and new. And that's what people gravitate to. I'm not saying the Dems should do evil, God forbid, but I think that there is a degree to which you can learn from how good guys are portrayed in wrestling. You can go back and watch Dusty Rhodes' Hard Times speech from back in the 80s, this incredible moment where this wrestler starts riffing on the economic problems of the 80s and how that ties into a wrestling match. You can really see how a working class can be inspired by the type of rhetoric that comes out of wrestling. You can see how the theatricality of just getting up and doing something unexpected grabs people's attention. But I don't think you have to descend entirely into the neo-kayfabe of blurring the truth. That's what I think would be a dangerous road for the Dems to go down, as evidenced by when they start using AI images to try and make fun of Republicans on social media. I'm like, you're going down the wrong road there. That is not the kind of playing at their own game that I think would work.
So, during the campaign, one of our shows that was very memorable for me was a conversation with Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who's a theorist who really looks specifically at the strongman phenomenon in government.
Yeah.
She wrote Strongman, Mussolini to the Present. And strongman, well, just think about the term itself. It's so close to what we're talking about right now. And Ruth talks about these theatrical displays of masculinity.
Yes.
Mussolini would take off his shirt in silent films and show his ripped abs or whatever he had. But maybe say a little bit about that, about how masculinity drives through that WWE narrative.
It's so important and yet so paradoxical, because it's this place, wrestling and authoritarian politics, where men are allowed to wear colors, to be over the top, to be loud, to be emotional, to cry. And one thing that I think is especially interesting to note about wrestling is not just the domain of the right wing. You have this beautiful aspect of wrestling that I think leads to a huge queer and trans fandom for wrestling, which is in every wrestling match, you have to have both participants willing to show in greatly exaggerated but realistic fashion pain and vulnerability. You have to go, I'm suffering. And this was something that totalitarian dictators knew too. It would always be like, I'm suffering for the nation. I'm working so hard. It's working me to the bone. Oh God, I can barely take it. And that's when the crowd goes, no, please, dictator. We want you. We want you to have that energy. We need you. And that's how it works in wrestling as well. It's a very similar phenomenon.
And so when you have that, everything that you just said maps pretty directly onto this insistence that there are only two sexes, two genders. I'm sure that and I know for a fact that you and I cannot go out for a glass of wine or a cup of coffee after this show because you're not in this country anymore. You should say a little bit about that.
No, I won't say where I am, but I fled the country because I'm trans and proud of it, and that is not something that is a welcome sentiment in Trump's in Trump 2.0. And so, I've sought shores where I have better protections. And I think that wrestling is wrestling is very paradoxical in this way. Like I said, you have a lot of people who watch it and they just see the surface machismo and the surface, not as much these days, but back in the day, the surface homophobia, transphobia, all of that stuff, racism, and they just like that surface level, and that can be very dangerous. But then you get this entire contingent of people who make beautiful wrestling that is indie, that is DIY, that's lo-fi, and it's all inspired by that sub-layer of vulnerability, of expressing yourself, of trying to talk about large social issues in the tiny little squared circle through the context of like something between ballet and pornography. So I really do think that there's a lot of hope for wrestling, even if the big ticket industry, I think, has had a lot of negative impacts.
Yeah, I just wonder, we're almost out of time here, but I think this is worth staying with for a moment. I'm thinking also of during all the celebration of 50 years of SNL, I think it was Fred Armisen who talked about being pretty young and seeing the B-52s come on Saturday Night Live and saying, oh, these are weirdos like me.
Yes.
There are entertainers who are like me. And I feel like it must be, I don't know whether it's for you or other people from the groups that you've been talking about right now, it seems like kind of a betrayal. It seems not kind of like it is a betrayal.
It is a betrayal
of the kind of faith that you and other people might have looked to there and thought, oh yeah, this is very flashy, colorful kind of stuff, and I recognize some of my own aesthetic there.
Of course.
And these are weirdos, and I'm a weirdo. I'm different.
And I'm a weirdo, and I'm different, and this is outsider art in its way. Yeah, and then it's a huge betrayal when you grow up and you learn that in 2025, Linda McMahon is willing to go along with the Trump agenda, which is going to dismantle a lot of the Department of Education, but use what remains as a cudgel on stuff like Title IX, which, has been this big problem for trans people, where Title IX is being misinterpreted and used as a weapon against us. But we can get into. I'm gonna get all too upset if I try to get into too many of the granular details, but. Yes.
I don't want to raise your blood pressure, and it's been so great to talk to you. I've got Josie, I've got tickets to the Kennedy Center. They're doing a heterosexual La Cage aux Folles tonight, so I just thought, maybe that would be worth going to see. But Josephine Riesman, so much fun, and it's so much truth, too, author of Ringmaster, Vince McMahon, and the Unmaking of America. We'll take a little break. We're going to come back with a little bit more, but thanks to you, Josie.
Just can't get enough, guy. Just always so puff, guy. I'm that bad type, make your mama sad type, make your girlfriend mad type, might seduce your dad type. I'm the bad guy. Duh. I'm only good at being
Hi, this is Colin reminding you that this show was originally recorded in March of 2025, so any space-time anomalies that happen are due to that. We're back. Time to say some thank yous, starting with the I was going to call him the Ringmaster. That's wrong. He's the Maestro, Dylan Reyes. That's his wrestling name. The Masked Maestro, Dylan Reyes. Our senior producer, Lily Tyson, is the producer of this episode. Therefore, it is part of Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions. I don't love everything they do, but I think this has been very good. And yes, here for the final segment. Also, a lot of other people helping here. I don't have time to name them all. But joining us now is Tim Kail. One thing I do want to say, because it's a good introduction to Tim, is I know lots of people. I have lots of friends who really, really, really love WWE. One of them might be named Frankie Graziano. Another one was my long time producer at my previous job, Bobby Sherwood, big WWE fan. So I've had a chance to sort of see the kind of delight that people get out of this. And we want to talk a little bit about that with Tim Kail, the creator of the Work of Wrestling website and podcast. He's also the host and producer of the Sarah Lawrence College podcast. I'm not sure how that ties in, although Yoko Ono went there, and I think she was also a very talented wrestler. So Tim Kail, well, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. As they say in the wrestling business, you're putting me over by having me on your show, Colin. I really appreciate it.
Okay, I want to maybe begin. I mean, weirdly, while we're talking about all this, something really exciting, even by the standards of WWE, where excitement is kind of in the air all the time. That's part of what they're selling. But even by those standards, something pretty exciting happened once again about a week ago, almost exactly a week ago. And we'll play an announcer reacting to what happened, and then we'll have Tim explain it to you all. C1, here we go. So what's happening there, Tim? Explain it to people who don't know about WWE.
Sure, that's a complex scene where you have John Cena, the perennial good guy, the Babe Ruth of professional wrestling, 20 plus years of hustle, loyalty, and respect, turning on Cody Rhodes, the good guy, the babyface, in what was a turn many people never thought would happen in history. So it really does represent, like many other inflection points in professional wrestling, a true turning of the tide. And what makes it particularly interesting is that Cena is actually on his farewell tour. This is his last year in professional wrestling, and we're going into his last WrestleMania. So, from a critical point of view, from an arts analysis point of view, it's really fascinating to see him stretching his creative muscle, willing to explore a new side of his personality in the final months of his run.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I'm not questioning any of that, but I'm also wondering. Just so we should say that the WWE has migrated over onto Netflix, a pretty massive deal. It's about $5 billion for about 10 years, with an option to extend an additional 10 or opt out after 5. But, they had this huge opening week at the beginning on January 6th with 6 million global viewers on Netflix. But it's been kind of tailing off. It's down a little bit below 3 the last 3 weeks or so. I mean, is it possible that John Cena has been asked to do this also because they need to get back in the headlines?
That's absolutely possible. I mean, I would never say that's not possible, but maybe I'm just a little more optimistic about this particular creative move. I actually think John Cena, if not the company's desires, I think his desire as a performer is in earnest to explore this other villainous side of himself. But yeah, I think the company will do anything to remain in the headlines.
I should say, I don't know exactly why this is so interesting to me, but TKO, which is the ultimate sort of entity that worked out this deal with Netflix, is presided over, or is sort of the brainchild of Ari Emanuel, one of the 3 Emanuel brothers who seem to have at least one aspect of human life is kind of cornered by each one of them. So yeah, I want to get to the theatricality of it in just a second, but we should probably say this too, because this was a pretty interesting deal by Netflix. They're not really famous for doing live stuff super well. On the other hand, there's a saturation problem for all the streamers, and you've got to figure out how to make yourself essential. And for these millions and millions and millions of WWE fans, it would seem to me anyway, you've got to have access. If it's not on USA anymore, Tim, if it's on Netflix, you got to go to Netflix. I mean, it's probably barely even a choice for most people.
Yeah, there is no choice. And that's an interesting point also for AEW. I don't even know if I want to call them necessarily a rival, but they're just another promotion that's working right now and is popular amongst diehard pro wrestling fans. They're making these deals to get on services like Max and Netflix, and it is forcing the wrestling fans' hand to subscribe if they want to have access. But in that way, I will say it's a fascinating time for wrestling because it's actually never been more accessible as a result of being a part of these streaming services. It's very accessible, easy to find. There's already a lot of Netflix subscribers who might think like, oh, what's this live show? What's this wrestling? I know about WWE. Let me check it out. And I think that's what they're hoping for. They're hoping the WWE's bread and butter is not the diehard pro wrestling fan. It's the casual wrestling fan who is just like curious. And I love that curiosity.
So, yes, even though it's live, because it's live, I think, and because it mirrors the sport of wrestling, we sometimes, I think, make the mistake of lumping it in there with competitive sports. And I know that you believe that it is much, much closer to theater. I find myself thinking of, I don't know if you were a Game of Thrones person, but on the night of the Red Wedding, which is when something really, really horrible happened on Game of Thrones, like, our phones at my house started ringing at 11. People were
Yeah.
just like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that happened. I don't know if I'm going to be able to sleep tonight." And I'm thinking, well, you understand this didn't really happen anywhere,
Yes.
but they were talking about it that way. They were talking about stuff. So I think sometimes people look askance at wrestling fans. It's like, well, they act like this stuff is real. No, everybody does this. They just do it in different formats. So I don't know. Talk a little bit more about the theatricality and the theater analogy to wrestling.
Well, I think that's such a gracious and thoughtful point that you make about the Red Wedding and about people reacting to television as if it's real. I think you got to approach professional wrestling with the understanding that, yes, to use the word that everyone in wrestling hates, it is fake, but it's fake in the way theater is fake. It's fake in the way film is fake. We all accept the artifice of a film. It's on a screen. It's separated from us. We watch light and sound mixed together to move us to an emotional catharsis. That's exactly what professional wrestling does. It uses the skilled manipulation of the human body, the attending live crowd, to move everyone to what I call the moment of pop. And that is the moment where people, they react instinctually. They aren't thinking, oh, that was the babyface winning, or oh, that's the heel winning. They just react. And in that moment, it's kind of like the transubstantiation of professional wrestling. It's where it becomes real for them when that hand hits the 1, 2, 3. It's real in that one specific moment. And I've had so many great experiences seeing plays where I completely forget about the fourth wall. I completely forget about any of the walls, and I'm just feeling my way through it. And I think that's exactly the way a lot of pro wrestling fans watch it. And I think if you want to think of it in a deeper level, then you go in the analytical route and try to figure out how it got you there.
Yeah, and I think, when we consume any kind of fictive, dramatic, or serial comic culture, there's these instincts we have that are just they're in us, they're baked into us. I don't know, you're watching The Godfather and Michael Corleone's beautiful Sicilian wife gets blown up and everything, and you want justice. What's going to happen to that guy, that bodyguard who just went running away? Are they going to get him? And that's, you probably have the same kinds of feelings about, say, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. What's going to happen there? Is there going to be justice? In each case, this is not entirely in the hands of the fates. It's in somebody's computer, but we care anyway, right?
Yes, we care anyway, and that's where a perfect example of emotional realism in professional wrestling and the kind of acting you would get on any prestige TV is in Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in particular. They have such a rich history from the indies all the way up to the main stage, and they're also kind of like everymen. They're not like these big ripped guys with muscles on top of muscles. There's a relatability to them, and there's an emotional vulnerability to them that I think is why they're so appealing. And you fall in love with these characters to the point where when they're beating on each other, you're reacting in horror or in delight, one way or the other.
So we're almost out of time here, but I think an interesting question for you is, there's somebody listening right now who's going, okay, Colin, okay, Tim, okay, I've never watched this stuff. I never saw any use for it, but I'll give it a try. What should they do? What's the on-ramp, Tim?
Oh, that's such a good question, because I'm not sure the on-ramp is just to watch an episode of Monday Night Raw. I'm not sure that's what I would say. So what I would say is actually watch 2 documentaries about professional wrestling. One's called Beyond the Mat, and the other is called Wrestling with Shadows. And Wrestling with Shadows is about Bret Hart. And earlier on in this podcast, this show, Josephine mentioned Screwjob. So the Wrestling with Shadows is all about the infamous Montreal Screwjob, which I can't go into now. But just watch that documentary because it gives you a peek behind the curtain. It shows you the inner workings, and it shows you the art of it all. And that's actually the inspiration behind my process of analyzing professional wrestling as art. It came out of that documentary. So I think that's the perfect on-ramp, actually. And after that, then go and peruse Peacock for WWE pay-per-views, watch a WrestleMania, do it casually. Don't do it like too intensely. If it's going to be a passion, it'll happen naturally.
Right. And you can always watch some stuff also with somebody who is a fan. In fact, I'll put you in touch with Bobby Sherwood. You can watch something with Bobby, and he'll explain everything that's happening in great detail, I might add. Hey, it's been so much fun to do this show, and so much fun to have you, Tim Kail, with us, creator of the Work of Wrestling website and podcast. We're going to say goodbye for now, but we'll be back next week with a whole bunch more shows.